Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Well, that was a rather sucky weekend of pro wrestling. Guess you can't win them all. That's alright, because we'll find some way to make it entertaining. We do it virtually every week here on the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast, so buckle up, kids. This one's going to be bumpy. If you are tuning in for the first time to the FSWR podcast, make sure you subscribe, like the show, and leave a comment down below. Definitely want to hear your thoughts on any or all topics on the show today, particularly the Royal Rumble, because a lot of people were none too happy about that one. I think that is a rare general consensus among wrestling fans, even the most die-hard loyal WWE marks. But we are here each Monday and Friday on YouTube and Rumble to bring you wrestling reports and recaps on AEW Dynamite, Rampage, NWA Powerrr, weekend shows and pay-per-views, as well as our weekly Friday Retro Review series, where we talk about NWA World Championship Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling. And if you like classic content, you will definitely want to stop back and check out the Friday show. Always a fun time. Today, however, we have our usual Monday podcast. I'm going to do the quick rundown of Rampage and Powerrr, which probably won't take that long at all. But then we will get to the meat of the matter for the show, the 2022 Royal Rumble that took place on Saturday night. So let's get going with this thing. Of course, starting with Rampage from January 28th. The opening match, and I'm not kidding with how this was announced, Justin Roberts says, and I quote, "Your opening contest, Moxley." You all remember when wrestling ring introductions actually used to have a purpose? And you would get to know everyone's hometown, ring credentials, height, weight, the whole 9 yards. I don't know. I mean, there's so much that sucks about modern wrestling, but ring announcers, they might be at the top of that list. Like, and the thing is, like, I'm not even saying they need to go like full Michael Bufford mode with the ring introductions, but I mean, at least a hometown and a weight announcement would be nice. Anyway, the match is Jon Moxley versus Anthony Bowens, and they had a match. That was the extent of what I got out of it. Again, it's on par with what I said about the Ethan Page match a week ago. It wasn't a bad match, but it was just a match. It was 50-50 back and forth. Mox sold and sold forever. I personally think Bowens got in way too much offense, and I don't think this was a great effective way to showcase Moxley in his road to redemption deal they're running with. You know, and for the AEW can do no wrong defenders that are going to try and argue, well, it's a ring rust story they're doing. A ring rust story? He was gone for 2 months. This is not a similar situation with CM Punk where he was gone for 11 years and you could at least buy the idea that it would take Punk a handful of matches to get his footing back. But Moxley doing back and forth, overly competitive TV matches where he's selling and letting the other guy get in long heat sessions on him. Bro, that's just stupid. And I know that Tony Khan's a big advocate of the Acclaimed. I know they have a little bit of a following, and they've started to gain some traction since they returned to TV. They're not a bad team. Like Bowens in particular has a great look and size, and if Caster can stay the hell out of trouble going forward, the Acclaim could end up making a real solid mid-card tag team in AEW. So I'm not advocating that these guys don't get pushed, but, if the end result is Tony wanting to protect the Acclaim and not job them out in under 3 minutes to put Moxley over like a beast, just don't book the match then. Put Mox in there with another job guy that he can smash in under a minute and get out. Regardless of how I feel about Moxley as a talent, the dude was your world champion at one point. He should be on another level above most of your roster. And when I see him going toe-to-toe, back and forth with a guy like Anthony Bowens right now, that's just back-asswards booking to me. Bowens is not a main event guy right now. He barely passes for an undercard guy right now. So, this is just another example of ineffective match layout to me. It also doesn't do him any favors when the presumed program they're going to be booking is Moxley and Bryan Danielson. You want me to get excited about seeing that match? Watching Moxley sell for Anthony Bowens ain't getting me to salivate, if you know what I mean. The Andrade Darby Allin skit was notable, if anything because of them filming it from Darby's completely barren locker room. I knew the guy was a minimalist, but still, no gear bag. And aside from the fact that I can barely understand a goddamn lick of Andrade's broken English, they're still trying to recruit Darby into their clustered job squad organization. It's about as unriveting as it sounds on paper. FTR versus Brock Anderson and Lee Johnson was actually pretty good considering how green Brock and Lee are. It felt like something you would actually see on like one of those old NWA TBS Superstation shows back in the day. Only two problems are that the match went way too long, and FTR have been booked like shit for so long in AEW. You really start to wonder if they only booked this match so Tony Khan can try and do damage control with them. Brock in particular looked pretty good here. Give this guy another year or so of training to work out some of the kinks. It'll be a real solid investment project for AEW in a couple years. Watching this match though, there's like one thing I could think the entire time. A tag match that I would actually really like to see. FTR versus Cody and Dustin. You want to talk about an old school mid-card tag team program that could really make for good television? Book that match. Especially in your god-awful tag division as it is, you could use some fresh tags in there. And if you're going to keep insisting on going against the grain with Cody as a babyface, at least you have a decent set of heels to go up against. So, that was the only thing I really got out of it. Jade Cargill versus Julia Hart was short, but bad. And factoring in that the match only went 2 minutes, and there was still more botches than one can count on 10 fingers and 10 toes. That's not good. And it was even more infuriating when they proceed this with 2 back-to-back women's pre-tapes featuring Thunder Rosa, Serena Deeb, and Mercedes Martinez. All of whom are 20 times the level of ring ability than Cargill and Julia. But whatever. We are getting Martinez and Rosa next week, and I can assure you that even a moderately bad Martinez-Rosa TV match will still be far and away better than most girls' matches we get in AEW. And the main event is Private Party versus the Jurassic Express for the tag belts. Oh yeah, Private Party are the #1 ranked tag team in AEW, by the way. And just like I had no idea how Red Velvet became the #1 ranked female in the division, I have no idea when Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy became the #1 ranked tag team. Unless I missed an entire year's worth of Dark Elevation programming. And the match was pretty much the match I expected Private Party and the Jurassic Express to have. They did 25,000 moves. They went 100 miles an hour from start to finish. Their kind of was an attempt to implement tag rules here, although that's very questionable. They did at least try to tell a story with them targeting Luchasaurus' legs so he could get the hot tag to Jungle Boy. Of course, the minute him and Jungle Boy are doing double team moves, Luchasaurus is perfectly fine to work on his bum knee, but what can you do? The excessive outside interference, I mean, at this point, I'm numb to it. It was an indie match. The AEW crowd loved it because it was all moves and flips and no ring psychology, and that's what they like. It's always great when the ring announcers are actively screaming at the guys for doing stupid shit in the ring. The prime example in this one being Jungle Boy putting Cassidy in the snare trap, and because Quinn has to be flashy for no reason, he cannot just simply get in the ring to break up the submission. No, he must break it up with a graceful, elegant shooting star press from the top rope. And he still didn't hit the landing on the way down. All in all, I will say this. In 2 title defenses, Jurassic Express are already much better tag team champs than the Lucha Fox, who I believe had the belts for something like 4 millennia, and they only defended the damn things twice. So already we're off to a better start. I like Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus' talents. Their matches, I'm not a fan of the excessive flippy shit they do, but they have spurts of good moments. Personally, I just think they need a better agent to sit them down and work out their matches with them beforehand. You know, even if that guy is Christian. Quite frankly, I thought that's why Cage was paired with these guys to begin with, so he could work more exclusively with them and teach them how to work the ring and just be better overall workers and talents. So far, that hasn't really played out like I expected. Like I said, they do some things right, but contextually, their matches just feel way too indie and PWG oriented to me. You know, and it's one thing for them to do the flashy stuff in regular undercard tag matches, but they're the champions now. They should be working on a main event level. And if that means getting them in programs with guys like FTR or Red Dragon to teach them how to really work that style more effectively, then just go there already. Don't wait. You know, the Gun Club matches, I presume they'll have a little less goofy gymnast stuff, but there's still a missing piece to the puzzle with the champs right now. That's all I'm saying. In another Rampage show where I'm finding there's less and less to really say about it when it's all over. They did some matches. They announced some matches for the upcoming couple of shows. A little bit of story advancement here and there, and that's all there was to it. It still doesn't feel any different than a glorified 3rd-hour extension to Dynamite. You know, and considering how long they've been running with this model now, I don't see anything changing anytime soon. I know it feels like I'm shitting on it, but honestly, I wouldn't even call it shitting on anything. It's just very formulaic and kind of boring. I know Rampage is a relatively new show, so in the interim, this format kind of works for them, but I mean, are they really going to go with this same show format 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, 24 months from now? I know we all like to think that AEW is all about long-term booking and all that hot jazz, but maybe that's something they ought to be thinking about in the coming year. What else can they do to make Rampage feel unique and different from Dynamite without extending the show length? The hour time frame works fine to me. I wouldn't change that. But I don't know. There's just something that they need to do different with this show. Quite honestly, call me crazy at this point, I wouldn't mind Rampage being sort of like one of those Sports Insider shows. More pre-tapes, more interviews, more video packages to hype up storylines. You can have 1 or 2 matches, but don't make that the central point of the whole show. You got Dynamite. You already do a lot of matches on that show to begin with. You got your dark elevation shows. I mean, that's all wrestling. So, would it hurt to try and experiment with that? Just make Rampage a solely talk-based show, I know that probably won't sit well with a lot of the AEW marks, but I don't know. Maybe it would spice things up a little bit. Just saying. Because I've been saying for a while, Rampage just isn't a must-see show. And it hasn't been for a long time now. So maybe they just need to start reevaluating things to come up with a game plan to make the show more interesting. That's all I'm saying. So moving along to the January 25th edition of NWA Powerrr. This was another PowerrrSurge edition of the show. A rather short edition, too. And another oddball viewing experience when it was done. For some reason, the Fixers were the hosts of the show, acting very wacky. I remember seeing Jay Bradley work years ago. I think he was in TNA around like the early to mid 2010s. I never knew the dude actually had personality. If he had it, he never showed it up until now. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time running down this one. These PowerrrSurge episodes usually come off like the old shotgun Saturday night shows from back in the day. Not a whole lot of grave importance comes out of it, just aside from a handful of forgettable TV matches. It's basically equivalent to an AEW Dark. Which you're probably sitting there wondering, well, why even review the shows if there's nothing more than a bunch of inconsequential squashes? I'm still trying to figure that one out. First match was Rodney Mack versus Devin Graves. Devin spelled D''VIN. It was just a big dude hoss fight, and really not a good one at that. It is good to see Rodney back in the ring, though. Dude looks pretty good for his age. I remember watching him in WWE like way back in the early 2000s. They never really did much with him back then, which is a very different story from the monster push they gave his now wife Jazz. But, if he's healthy enough to keep going and he sticks around for an occasional program here and there, sure, why not? He still looks like a mean badass. Following that, we had more Fixers on screen where they talked about a whole mass of weird things. All I really got out of it was that Wrecking Ball Legursky likes cheeseburgers, chicken, and waffles, and Bradley kept getting pissed at him for interrupting. Again, I know in a bubble I'm supposed to be mildly entertained by the Fixers being comedy goofballs. I guess my question is, why all of a sudden are the Fixers big fat comedy geeks when they were just billed as monster heels on the show less than a month ago? Like, to go from that to what we got with them on this show, it just came right the fuck out of nowhere. At least give me some context beforehand. So then we get a replay of the Austin Aries Rhett Titus match from Hard Times 2, which, looking back at that show, I remember it being one of the better matches on that December pay-per-view, and I think it was the opener. It also hit me rewatching this match, realizing that it was a tournament match centered around the Junior Heavyweight Championship. A tournament that I still believe is ongoing, right? I think I mentioned it on the TV show, or I think it's been mentioned on the TV show once or twice, but as far as my recollection goes, I don't remember seeing any follow-up tournament matches since then. Unless they're doing them all on that NWA USA show that I'm not watching. But, I don't know, the whole junior heavyweight tournament just feels like it's been cast under the bus. And, it was a fun match. And much like I said about Rodney, it's good to see Aries back in the ring. I know he was at the center of some big controversy a few years ago, right before he left Impact Wrestling. And, if I were ignorant to Aries' history of being an unlikable prick douchebag, I may have been shocked when I read that story, but, having followed Aries' career back from his Ring of Honor days, he doesn't necessarily have what you would classify as a spotless reputation. But still, if I were booking the tournament, I'd probably have Aries win it. I mean, dude's still a great talker. He's a solid worker. And last I checked the brackets, he's really the only guy at the entire tournament that stood out. So, Maddie versus Kylie Ray was a fine match. I think both girls wrestled on last week's show too in separate matches, and I remember noting they were both pretty good. This was pretty good too. Not sure where they found this Maddie chick, but whoever trained her, hats off to him. She's not the smoothest worker yet, but she shows a lot of personality. She looks good. She's very pretty. She was in the right place at the right time. She seemed perfectly comfortable with transitions and not getting so fixated on going from spot to spot. Which is something that a lot of people in the business struggle with today, male and female. Getting so caught up in the spots and the moves and not actually learning how to work the crowd and be a character. But Maddie was hitting on all cylinders here, so good for her. I hope she keeps up the good work and keeps training hard. And I don't want to keep regurgitating the same old here, but, I dig Kylie's ring work. The whole Bayley-esque ripoff gimmick is sort of eye-rolling, but she knows what she's doing in there. Her timing's good, her selling's good, her basics are well executed. She's got a lot of upside as a talent. The whole sporadic periods where she appears and disappears from television makes it kind of hard to trust pushing her, but, she can avoid being the female Lio Rush. Kylie is someone I would build to go after the singles title at some point. And the main event is the Fixers squashing two geeks. Again, the whole dynamic of the Fixers on this show is so weird. It's like 1 minute they're hosting the show and being over-the-top cartoon characters, and fast forward to the main event, we're reverting back to them being heels. I don't know. I know they're relatively new to the show, so I should probably give it a little more time to see where things go, but the way the Fixers were featured on this show was very head-scratching. I actually kind of dug the vibe with them as Colby Corino's muscle. I hope they didn't drop that, because with a guy like Colby's size, I could actually buy the whole dynamic of the scrawny loudmouth heel using the two beefy bodyguards to do his dirty bidding to protect him. So, I hope that's something they stick with. Other than that, though, wasn't really much else to report on the match. Again, these PowerrrSurge shows don't really have a whole lot going in terms of story advancement on the primary show. They're probably skippable in large part, but I'm at least actively trying to watch the shows to get more familiarized with some of the newer characters they've debuted in the last year or so. Some of them I dig. I like Mims. Colby Corino's good. Odinson and Perro are pretty good. Other dudes like Fandango and Matt Cardona and Mike Knox, not too keen on those guys. So it's a hit and miss in that department. I'll tell you one thing, though, is as much as I don't really agree with them trying to book the women and the men's segments 50-50 in terms of screen time, NWA's women's division, it is so much more credible than AEW's. It just sucks that they couldn't hold on to Thunder Rosa and Serena Deeb on a longer-term basis, because if they still had those two locked down under contract right now, NWA's women's division would probably be the best female division in any organization right now, including WWE. And my God, was that ever apparent after watching the pay-per-view. And, it is what it is, but I don't know who's doing the scouting for the female talent in NWA, but they seem to at least have a clue. So, next week, I presume it'll be a normal Powerrr show, so we will get back to the usual formatting. But aside from that, if you didn't watch the show, I'd probably recommend skipping it. But I do want to get going on this Royal Rumble pay-per-view coverage, because as we all know with WWE, these shows go on for 10 fucking years. Or, I guess we're referring to these as premium events now. There's another good Vince McMahonism for the book. A couple of things, though, before I run down the card. I wanted to weigh in on this topic because I know there was a lot of heavy criticism of this show by the end. People saying this was one of the worst Rumbles in modern history. Some people were even saying it was worse than the 2014 or 2015 Rumble. And it's a fair analysis. At least I could defend aspects of the 2014 and 2015 Rumble pay-per-views because at least those shows had 2 Match of the Year candidates on them. Honestly, if we're judging it by comparison in that field, I would probably say this year's Rumble was worse than both of those pay-per-views because this show did not have a single Match of the Year candidate on it. Not even close. And that includes the 2 big title matches that I was looking forward to going in. If anything else, my biggest criticism of the show overall is that it was just boring. Not factoring in the whole predictability of the whole Brock Lesnar story throughout the night. I mean, most people saw that coming a light year away. I just had trouble getting into anything on this show. And like the one match I was really looking forward to in that Brock Lesnar-Bobby Lashley match, that really left me feeling underwhelmed by the end. So, I'll get to more of my general thoughts at the end of the recap, but just wanted to throw my 2 cents in the discussion panel because I know the big thing people took away from the show was how bad it was. And, yeah, it was pretty bad. But by and large, I would more so describe it as lifeless and dull. So I missed the first 6 minutes of the show during the live stream, which meant that I missed half of Roman Reigns' entrance. And normally I'm not a big fan of the champion making his entrance before the challenger, but given what they did here, I see why they did it this way. And after listening to Michael Cole and Pat McAfee bring up the whole backstory with Roman, Seth, and the Shield, in the back of my head right before Seth came out, I was like, what would be kind of cool if Seth came out to the old Shield theme? And lo and behold, 5 seconds after that, you hear the old classic megaphone click followed by the Sierra Hotel India Echo Lima Delta Shield. Fuck, dude, that look on Roman's face when he heard that music, it was perfect. He's just like, you son of a bitch. I will concede through all of it, the announcers going back and forth between referring to him as Moxley and Ambrose. It was very weird. Much like most of Moxley's run in WWE was just weird. But I'll tell you, here's what I liked about this match before the opening bell. There was a narrative and a theme going into this match. Even though it was essentially heel versus heel, the whole deal was that Seth has been able to get under Roman's skin, painting him as resentful for never being able to get over the fact that it was Seth that broke up the Shield and basically saw success before Roman ever did. And they really played that theme up throughout the match. And there were a lot of good elements to it. I've never been the biggest fan of Rollins' ring work necessarily, but him and Roman work really well together. They did a nice job playing up Roman getting flustered where you could actually sort of buy the possibility of Seth beating Roman for the belt. Seth pulled out a couple of the old Shield tools like the power bomb, the fist bump. He did the curb stomp to Roman at one point. Normally I'm not on board with the multiple overkill WrestleMania falls finishes and the near falls galore, but given the story going in and the history with these two, this worked. And the people actually got into the near falls, so that's why I was okay with it. What didn't work was the finish. And I was even all right with the fuck DQ finish. I think modern wrestling fans have been so desensitized to shit finishes, especially in WWE. It's like anytime you see a DQ or a count-out finish, your immediate impulse is to crap on it. For my money, not every single match needs to have a clean finish, and in moderation, screwy finishes do work great. And it would work. Let me try that again. It would have worked perfectly here if they didn't fuck it up so bad in execution. What happens is Roman locks Seth in the guillotine choke, And Seth's on the verge of passing out near the ropes. So Charles Robinson goes to do the deal where he lifts up Seth's arm to see if he's still conscious. And I guess the idea was for Robinson to lift up the hand, and then Seth's hand was supposed to accidentally drop on the bottom rope, which would force a break. And like, it sounds clever on paper. Even if they would have pulled it off, I still don't buy it would have looked anything other than contrived. But what happens is Roman refuses to break the hold, so Robinson throws the match out. Seth wins via DQ, but Roman keeps the belt. Yeah. And the whole angle afterwards with Reigns going ballistic and smashing Seth with the chair over and over again, I really like that angle. I'll tell you one thing, I really like the first visual where Roman whacked Seth across the spine and then Seth just kind of crumbled down onto the bottom rope, exactly how it looked when the group initially broke up. Whatever year that was, 2013, 2014. I know, it just, God, everything starts to blend together after so long. But Roman just beat him with the chair. He ended up walking out with that totally glazed over look, and it furthered along the story great. Yeah, because you look at it in hindsight, it's like, yeah, Roman got the last laugh and he kept his belt, but at the end of the day, the story was that that Seth got Roman to snap. So, really, who won the battle at the end of the day? So this opener was really good. Minus the execution of the finish, it was still a good idea in theory. And Seth and Roman, they worked their roles really well here. So I was off to a pleasantly surprised start for the show. This is the first 30 minutes of a 5+ hour event, and the show peaked at this point, which is never a good sign, and it meant that I was in for plenty of torture to come. They began with something great, and they immediately followed it with something not so great. The 30 Women's Royal Rumble match. I honestly had no idea how I wanted to recap this going in. Like, if I wanted to just give you the TLDR recap and just say it sucked cock and move on. But given that I had to sit through all 60 minutes of this fucking atrocity, I figured you'd all enjoy the slow burn torture ride with me. So I'm going to make you sit through it. What I actually ended up inadvertently doing is just jotting down a couple bullet points with each entry, and honestly, that'll probably suffice as a general analysis. You'll pick up on the theme as we roll along. It started with Sasha coming in at number 1. Seeing Melina enter at number 2 was kind of funny, figuring how I just recapped a match of hers on NWA programming a week ago, and a week later, here she is making a Royal Rumble appearance. Of course, she had to make sure she cried after the opening bell rang, because women, you know. But she got dumped in the first minute, so thanks for coming, I guess. Things did not immediately pick up with Tamina coming out at number 3. Jesus Christ, Tamina is still a thing in WWE. Been in the business for some going on 11 or 12 years. She still sucks. You just think about all the female talent that's gotten released in the last year or two. Like Mercedes Martinez, Mia Yims, all those girls, but God damn it all, we got to keep Tamina employed. Kelly was number 4. And if you all remember Kelly in her prime, she was slightly less horrible than she was in the 2 minutes that she was involved in this match before getting eliminated. Number 5 was Aaliyah. I've watched many Aaliyah matches during her run in NXT under the Robert Stone brand. Never thought she was any good. Really didn't do anything to impress me here either. Liv Morgan was number 6. Didn't Didn't she just wrestle Becky Lynch at that Day One show I reviewed at the beginning of the month? No. Either way, she was rather underwhelming with her performance in this one. Number 7 was Zelina Vega. Queen Zelina Vega. My apologies. Because King of the Ring hasn't meant jack shit in WWE for well over a decade, so let's do a Queen of the Ring series, because equality. The men do it, so by default the women should have to do it, because that's modern day logic. Number 8, we had Bianca Belair, which was the first time in the entire Rumble match where I actually got somewhat invested and started paying attention. And Bianca ended up running the gauntlet until the Final Four, so she's not quite at Geek Squad level when it comes to the women's division, although I'm sure Vince will sour on her eventually like he does with everyone else. I think it was around this point in the Rumble where I started actually getting concerned about the concept of the women getting dumped over the top rope onto the floor, especially when you consider how fucking tiny a lot of these chicks are. Especially Zelina. She's like, what, maybe 5 feet at the most? God, watching her get dumped over the top rope later in the match was like watching someone fall out of a fucking building. I don't know. It's just kind of amusing watching these girls struggle to pick each other up near the ropes to try and dump one another out. It's like watching 8-year-olds scuffle on a trampoline. Like, at least Bianca and Tamina are strong enough where they can pick girls up on their shoulders, but oh my God, still. Speaking of girls that still exist, Dana Brooke. Really? Coming out at number 9. God, I remember when they aired vignettes of her back in NXT in like the mid-2010s. At least back then, it looked like she eased on the Botox. Now she just looks like a more feminine version of Charlotte Flair. Yeah, I know what I said. Number 10 was Michelle McCool. She was in there a while. Number 11 was Sony Deville, who apparently has a gimmick now where, because she's an authority figure on SmackDown, she has the split persona. She has the jacket on. She is not an active competitor. But when the jacket comes off, it's hair up, square up. Sorry, that line still makes me cringe. Number 12, we had... who the hell was it? Oh yeah, Natalya. Number 13, the return of the infamous Cameron. Wasn't she the chick who said her favorite match involved Alicia Fox? Oh, she didn't last long. She also totally looked like she didn't want to be there either. Can't blame her. She lasted right until her old Funkadactyl partner came in. That was Naomi, who came in at 14. Who's still feeling the glow. I actually kind of like Naomi. I remember her being one of the very few talkers in WWE where she actually sounded authentic when she had to dictate her scripted verbiage. Number 15, another generic blonde, Carmella. Best thing WWE ever did with Carmella was have her show up and be hot as Enzo and Big Cass's eye candy. Then they decided to put her in the ring and make her work. And now she's got a fucking face mask on. So the one quality that made Carmella watchable, they took that away. I think it was around this point where you could visibly see that half the girls in the ring were blown up. And if you have ever seen exhausted female athletes work long wrestling matches, boy, let me tell you, it is quite the visual. It's probably why there's always a conscious decision to keep most women's matches under 10 minutes. Finally, at number 16, a real fucking badass, Ria Ripley, who also lasted a good while, but my God, dude. You want to talk about a real superstar potential? How in the fuck does WWE not see this with Rhea Ripley? She's got the size, the look, the mic skill, the charisma, the ring presence. She's got the whole entire fucking package deal. Much like Bianca Belair to that same extent. And all the while they're pushing fucking Liv Morgan and Doudrop, and their top two champions are still the same two overpushed chicks whose novelty wore off well over 4 or 5 years ago. They just don't fucking get it. I know I'm venting, sorry, just... like watching this match, I realized how accurate my article I wrote on the Horsemen in WWE were. Just... There's just no vision in this company. Absolutely none. Of course, they had to take the piss out of Rhea's momentum by putting Charlotte in there at number 17. Number 17, yeah. That about matches up with her laundry list of inconsequential championship wins over the course of her 8 or so years in the company. God, I can't stand Charlotte. Easily the most overrated, overhyped, overprotected, excessively forced female wrestlers WWE's ever had. Yeah, like honestly, it's worse than Trish Stratus. Yeah, it's worse than the fucking Bella sluts. And it's not even like Charlotte was ever great either. Like, I know that'll piss a lot of people off, but god damn it, son. Look at her track record. Name me 5 good Charlotte Flair matches off the top of your head without doing research. In fact, no. I'll do you one better. Name me 3 Charlotte Flair matches where she doesn't visibly fuck up a spot or look clumsy transitioning from one spot to another. I rest my case. There's nothing natural about her character either. She's just a low-rent carbon copy of her dad with different genitalia. She wishes she was a 16th of the charisma or drawing power that Ric Flair had. Can't stand her. Never thought she was any good. I said the same shit about her when I watched her in NXT, all before the plastic surgery and the Botox injections. The biggest pop of the match I got was Ivory coming out at number 18 in her goddamn Right to Censor uniform. Just out there with a microphone to admonish all the women as little girls. That was great. Rhea eliminated her like a minute after she got in. I was upset. I wanted to hear Ivory talk on the stick longer. Man, hearing that old RTC theme too. Talk about an underrated faction that actually would kind of work pretty well in the modern era of pro wrestling if they really wanted it to. I'd love to see that gimmick back. Number 19, we got the classic return of the Bella twin with the smaller breasts and no ass. I think it was Brie. Oh yeah, in fact I know it was because I think this was the one with that horrible theme entrance. Number 20, the modern-day female Jeff Jarrett. You got Mickie James, who actually got to come out to the ring not only with her hardcore country music, but she even brought out the Impact Knockouts title with her. I think I read recently that there may have been some kind of working agreement between TNA and WWE recently. Maybe that was just for the Mickie appearance. I'm not really sure, but good on her that they let her come in sporting the Knockouts title and the theme music. That was cool. And, in the scope of how things went down in this match, Mickie was probably one of the better workers they had. I don't want to make it seem like I'm shitting on Mickie. I'm just casually observing her crossover work with Impact and the NWA right now, and I'm just observing some of her executive decision-making. Number 21, really doing a great job building up that future female generation, breaking out the Diva Guard, Alicia Fox. She's... I don't know. She's Alicia Fox. What do you expect? She was never a ring wizard back in her heyday. Although she's considerably better at running the ropes than Kelly Kelly was. Next up was Nikki Cross, or Nikki ASH, whatever they're calling her now. She was number 22. She's also apparently a heel now for some reason. Whatever. Summer Rae was in at 23. Summer was actually a redhead in this match for a change. She looked better blonde. Out next was the bigger boobed Bella, the one that was schlepping Cena several years ago. Sarah Logan was number 25. At this point, I'm just trying to push this along. Sorry for the lack of detail I'm not providing. Not that anything of substance was going on. At this point in the match, I'm just looking for ways to entertain myself. Another legend coming in at number 26, Lita. Gosh, she might be the only female athlete in the history of the business where she just doesn't age. It's like from 22 dating all the way back to whenever the first time I saw Lita on WWF TV was. Got to be going back to the late 90s probably. She still looks like Lita. Mighty Molly was number 27, who got attacked by the other cosplay superhero, Nikki Asshole. At this point, I don't believe there was a single female in the ring under the age of 57. I think the only two younglings in there at this point were Bianca and Rhea, which is both telling and scary to really think about when you consider the future of WWE's women's division. Whatever's left of it. And then number 28 hit. Ronda Rousey, who apparently could not decide if she wanted to come out as a ninja or a maskless Power Ranger. Seriously, what the fuck was that gear? Is she that out of shape where you had to hide her entire body? You're telling me Ronda hasn't hit the treadmill at least once in the last few years with being away from WWE? Well, anyway, I'll at least give her credit in the sense that once Ronda came out, she was immediately the biggest star in the match, bar none. It also totally spoiled the finish of the match, but you take what you can get. Her ring work's a bit rusty, but, I presume she'll get better when she starts getting back into the swing of things. Provided she's sticking around for a while. I have to assume she is. I cannot imagine this was just to get her through this Mania. Number 29 was Shotzi Blackheart, who I was never all that big on in NXT. I never understood the whole green hair, tank riding, punk rock, grungy gimmick thing with her. Never thought she was a particularly good wrestler either. But that left the final entry. Another great former NXT project that got horribly botched and fucked up once she got called up to the main roster. Shayna Baszler. I was a big fan of Shayna several years ago, especially when she was the champion. Great worker, great talker, looked like a badass, carried herself like one. I mean, honestly, that's all I could ask for with female athletes in WWE. Do you look intimidating? Do I buy that you would believably kick anyone's ass, male or female? Girls like Rhea, girls like Bianca, girls like Shayna, I buy them as powerhouse ass kickers. So, eventually we cut the dead weight, got it boiled down to a moderately decent crew with Rhea, Bianca, Shayna, Ronda, and oh, fuck it, whatever. I'll throw her in there too. Charlotte. Charlotte eventually dumped Rhea. I was pissed about that. Just another chapter in the book of Charlotte doing everything she can to destroy and bury Rhea's career one step at a time. And it wasn't long after that where Charlotte dumped Bianca and Shayna too. Because, who cares about the next generation of female athletes? Still gonna make it all about fucking Charlotte Flair, long past the point of her becoming stale. And Ronda won. She dumped Charlotte. Literally like less than 20 seconds after Charlotte had dumped Bianca and Rhea. It's like, I don't know, dude. He couldn't just even have Bianca and Rhea dump Charlotte and then have Ronda dump Bianca and Rhea. Just so fucking dumb. And of course, Ronda had to do the stupid sign point gimmick afterwards, which is always so cringe. And speaking of that WrestleMania sign, I think Divine Intervention had tempted fate on Saturday night to try and handcuff WWE to do away with the stupid sign pointing gimmick they do every year. Apparently there was a malfunction with some of the pyro, and at one point the WrestleMania sign had actually caught fire a couple times throughout the night. So not only did they have to evacuate that portion of the crowd to deal with it, but they had to lower the sign to not just put the fire out, but so that they could get it back up in time so that the Rumble winners could point at it. That totally had to be a Vince call. God damn it, pal. Put that fire out and get that sign back up there. The winners point at it. We do it every year. It's always such good shit. The last few minutes of the match were merely passable. The rest of the match was bad. Like, flat out bad. I don't even mean like Jade Cargill, botchy, squash TV match on Rampage bad. This was like maybe half a star better than that Rebel match I watched in TNA years ago. And I'm not exaggerating with that. I might even say this was slightly worse, especially because of how laborious it was. Look, I tried to have fun recapping the match. Some of my jokes are going to get eye rolls from people. Sorry if you don't have a sense of humor and you can't have a good laugh. But these women's Rumble matches, they've been a real detriment to these Rumble shows the last few years. I understand the purpose of why they did it initially. And as a trial run to see how it would work, okay, fine. But this is like, what, the 4th or the 5th Women's Royal Rumble? And every year, it's the same story. The matches are no good. The star power is not there to necessitate doing it. And God, was that ever apparent after watching this year's this Women's Rumble match. And by and large, I just don't need to watch our snooze fest with the girls. I know that's going to strike the wrong chord with the social justice equity activists out there, but I mean, dude, you're telling me you're on board with watching these matches over the next decade? It's one thing to advocate for equal treatment between the men and the women on this show, but haven't we already established now that this formula doesn't work in a Rumble setting? You don't have the talent pool to necessitate an all-women's Rumble match every year. It's one thing to break out the legends now and again for surprise entries, but I mean, fuck, that's all this whole thing was. It was just legends and surprise entries. There was no one from NXT that showed up here, as far as I recollect. Maybe that's for the better, but God, is that not an indictment on how bad things are in developmental right now? Like, the women couldn't even get a shine or two here. You have such little confidence in your developmental system right now, you couldn't have at least 1 or 2 girls get a few minutes to shine here? Meanwhile, I'm just thinking of like other regular roster girls that were totally MIA from this match. Where the fuck was Asuka at? Is she hurt or something? She in the doghouse? I know Bayley's still out with a torn ACL, but man, even a surprise entrance from a Bayley or an Asuka or an Io Shirai, like, that would have made all the difference in the world. They're just going to keep regurgitating this formula every year because that's what WWE does. I just don't see what they think they're gaining by continuing to do these Women's Rumble matches every year. Like I said, they're never any good. And all they do is weigh the show down. It's just, all it does is add an extra hour to the show in the long run. So, yeah, man, I could do without these Women's Rumble matches. And that's not misogynist, that's just a God's honest truth. I've watched several of them. They're not good. They're never good. Unless they have the star power to do it, they might just want to stay away from these. And I can confidently say that after having endured that calamity of a Women's Rumble match, I about tapped out on wanting to see any more female wrestling on the show. So, of course, they immediately followed this with Doudrop and Becky Lynch. And at this point, I figured I had about enough time to brush my teeth, do my nightly skincare routine, hang up some laundry, and prepare for work in the gym the next day. So I had my Raycons in. I actively listened to the match while pursuing these other tasks. And aside from the announcers being loud the entire time, most of what I heard coming through my earbuds were some brief trash talking and the occasional big miss splash, I presume from Dewdrop. Didn't sound like the crowd was all that interested. Becky retained her belt, and I really have nothing further to report on it. Admonish me in the comment section if there's something earth-shattering in this match that I should go out of my way to see. That finally brought us to the match that I really was looking forward to. They put me through Chinese water torture to get to this point, but we got the Bobby Lashley Brock Lesnar WWE title match. They had a great video package they aired before to give it that big fight feel that I was anticipating it would have. Match still should have happened in Mania, but again, with WWE, I will take what I can get now. And I'll get to the big story at the end, but as a match, again, I really wanted to like this. And I will say this. It was not a horrible match, but for whatever reason, this just didn't work. And I don't think it was for a lack of effort, but the chemistry just didn't click here. Maybe they were pressed for time. I don't know. Above all else, it was every standard, boring, paint-by-numbers Brock Lesnar match you've seen 100 million times in the last decade. And, the problem came with the fact that, 90% of Brock's offense in this match is purely German suplexes, all of which Lashley took really awkwardly on the landings. I don't know if he was trying to overcompensate for something or if he just didn't feel comfortable taking the bumps, but the 7 or 8 times I watched Lashley get dropped with those Germans, I felt really uncomfortable watching him take those landings. Some of them he took right on the brunt of his shoulder. Other times I watched him, his neck smack off the mat. A little bit of whiplash occasionally. It didn't look good. And honestly, that's all the match was. There was a brief period where Lashley got a little bit of offensive flurry, but other than that, the extent of my notes read, Lashley took awkward Germans for 10 minutes. So the match was a bit of a letdown, but, the story was the big takeaway. Lashley ends up taking the F5 from Lesnar and catching his boot on the ref. While he's down, Roman Reigns comes in the back door and spears Lesnar. He goes over and reaches his hand out so Paul Heyman could deceitfully hand him the WWE title. Reigns clocks Lesnar with the belt, walks out, but not before scoffing at the championship. That was a great visual. Reigns clocking Lesnar with the belt and then looking at the title like, what the fuck is this inferior secondary belt that Lesnar's carrying around? What a joke. Epic burial. That was probably the highlight of the segment for me. Just Roman looking at the WWE title like, give me a break. But, yeah, that was the story. Heyman turned on Lesnar again, and now he's back with Roman heading into Mania. And Lashley pinned Lesnar to regain the belt. A mildly predictable finish, and it also made the men's Rumble match totally telegraphed. That's not necessarily a bad thing either. They needed to get from point A to point B after the whole day one debacle with Roman not being able to work the show. Lesnar as the WWE champion was only going to be temporary anyway. Everybody knew that. And with what went down in the main event, they got one of their world title programs set in stone. As for Lashley, guess it's a wait and see. So that was a match. A moderately disappointing match with a good finish to set up a title program for Mania that everyone knew was coming well in advance. Wish I could say more about it, but that's all there really is to take away from it. Another match on the show I didn't write a whole lot down about was this Edge Beth Phoenix versus Miz and Maurice mixed tag. It was exactly how I figured it'd be. Miz sucks. Maurice is not very good herself. Beth is a part-timer, thus Edge is the default best worker in this match at age 48 or however old he is. It was all smoke and mirrors. Everything looked relatively fine in execution. Not a whole lot of people cared about it. And the babyfaces predictably won clean. I mean, by the time this match came around, I was more so over the show entirely and just wanted to get through the men's Rumble match so I could go to fucking bed. And they honestly could have cut this thing from the show and I wouldn't have blinked hearing it. But let's get to the men's Rumble because, you know, as much as I just sat here and complained that the women's Rumble was nothing but legends and previous acts, this match probably could have used one or two of those. AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura were draws 1 and 2. Talk about a feud that I wish they'd have taken behind the barn and shot in the head, never to speak of again. Bad flashbacks with that one. Austin Theory was in at number 3. And I've been a big Austin Theory guy for a long time now, especially watching him work down in NXT. I still think they could have done so much more with him in developmental before he got called up. But from what I've heard and what I've read, Theory seems to be doing pretty well for himself on the main roster. Vince apparently has been working close with him. He seems to like him. He's getting a moderately big push right now. He went well over 20 minutes in this match too, so obviously someone in management gave this guy the green light. And good on him, man. You know, he deserves it. He's a real hard-working dude. And he's young, too. He's like, what, 23 or 24 years old? So he's got a long way to go in this business. That dude's got star written all over him. And if they stick the course with them and don't fuck him up, even though we all know they will because it's WWE, this dude could be a credible world title contender in the next few years. Number 4, we had Bobert Roode, another criminally undervalued and underappreciated worker in the business. Still toiling around mid-card purgatory on main roster WWE. Still looks like $1 million, though. It's a shame Vince and management don't see it the same way. Oh, by the way, I did catch the TNA chants when him and AJ had that brief showdown. Next out at number 5 was Ridge Holland, still sporting the face shield after having his face caved in on that day 1 pre-show. Poor guy. You know, Ridge Holland's starting to become like the modern day Rey Mysterio. It's like everywhere you turn, Holland's either hurting himself or getting put on the shelf somehow. It sucks. Number 6 was Montez Ford. Number 7, we had Damien Priest, who they apparently either changed his main roster theme or they modified it in some way. And if they did outright change it, fuck you, WWE. Priest's NXT theme was fucking dynamite. Ain't no reason you should be changing his music. Number 8, we had Sami Zayn, who looks more and more homeless every time I see that dude on camera. It's like, honestly, what does he care at this point? Apparently after signing a contract extension with WWE. I think at this stage, Sami knows his place in WWE. Why start trying now? Especially when it's all probably gets future endeavored in the next 6 months. We had Johnny Knoxville in at number 9, which I guess you can chalk up as the big celebrity / surprise entry for this year's Rumble. And the funny thing is they actually had him get pretty physical with some of the dudes in there. And his stuff didn't look half bad. He at least knows how to take a moderately decent looking bump. Can't say I dug the whole Jerry Lawler getup. It's more like Andy Kaufman getup, if anything. But, you know, from what he did in there and the minimal time he spent in the ring, he wasn't overly embarrassing or disappointing. No, I'm not familiar with the whole new Jackass series, so I'm not really the guy to comment on anything Johnny Knoxville related in terms of TV shows or hit series, but I mean, if they're keeping the dude around for Mania season, whatever. They probably got something big in store for him. I think Angelo Dawkins was number 10. Or apparently Angelo Hawkins, as Michael Cole referred to him as. Maybe he's a distant relative of Kurt Hawkins. Who knows? Number 11 was Omos. Good fucking lord, they're still trying to make Omos a thing. All lumbering 7'2" of him. And the best thing they had going with Omos for that little time I saw him before was that pairing he had going with AJ. Like, at least in a tag team setting, AJ could do all the work to keep Omos out of the ring as long as possible. Now they broke it off and they're trying to push Omos on his own. Maybe I should start calling him Onos. Because that's what I'll probably be saying once I start pushing him in title programs against marquee names. Heads up! Y'all know it's coming. Out at number 12, we had Ricochet. I honestly forgot that dude was still employed. Number 13 was Chad Gable, another criminally underappreciated athlete in WWE. And it's funny, too, Gable actually ended up being one of the big highlights of the entire match. When he came out to the ring to try and get the big huddle with everyone to go after Omos, like a dweeb, he just goes, okay, I got a plan. Priest, you're the biggest guy. You go after him. And then Omos dumped Priest out like a minute later, and you could just, like, see the visual on Gable's face. He's like, oh, shit. I love Chad Gable, dude. I've been a big fan of his for a long time. That guy would be so great if he wasn't in WWE. AEW would probably catch fire with him for all of, like, 2 weeks before he disappeared from TV, never to be seen again. But God, like, if that guy went to New Japan, I can only imagine the kind of stuff he'd do. Dominic Mysterio was number 14. Happy Corbin was number 15. Fucking Dolph Ziggler was number 16. Speaking of guys that I forgot were still employed, he's still Dolph Ziggler. What can you say? Ain't nothing changed about that dude in well over a decade. Still thinking he's Shawn Michaels without any of the credentials that made Shawn Michaels the star he was. Number 17, we had Sheamus. Some guy named Rick Boogs was 18. Literally all he did in the match was pick guys up in the air and press them around for a bit. At this point, I about tapped out in this match and just wanted the damn thing to be over. Number 19 was Madcap Moss. I think I started contemplating why I didn't take up weed by the point we got to this point. Just bore me to tears in this match. Evidently, as soon as the weed thoughts came into mind, who should come out but number 20, Matt Riddle. I know Riddle's an acquired taste for a lot of people. I always thought Riddle was entertaining. I know he doesn't strike a good chord with a lot of people out there, but he's funny. Like, that's probably the biggest reason I'm a fan of him. He's just like, he's one of those dudes where I don't think he tries to be comical, but he just is because he's Matt Riddle. Like, in a nutshell, he's a guy that doesn't have to be a character because his character is himself. He is an extension of his own personality. But he's a good athlete, too. Like, some of the work I saw him do in NXT, like, that was peak Riddle performance back in the day. So, you know, yeah, he's goofy and hokey, but, he's a good talent. And, the funny thing is, when he got called up to the main roster, I didn't think that Vince was going to give him the time of day at all, but he got a push. They put him with Orton, gave him the tag belts. Someone in management likes him, whether that's Vince directly or people working and getting in his ear. He's getting featured on TV, so cool. Coming back from a fairly bad neck injury at number 21, Drew McIntyre, which is really surprising given the fact that they had shot that angle at the Day 1 show where he got jumped by Corbin and Moss in the back. Apparently that angle was done to write Drew off of TV for a period of time. Apparently he's been undergoing a lot of neck issues. Well, he's superseded his way back to recovery, and 3 weeks later, he's back working a pay-per-view match. Injury must not have been as severe as they were making it out to be. Number 22, we had Kevin Owens. Rey Mysterio was in at number 23. Kofi Kingston was number 24. God, poor Kofi. The yearly Kofi Rumble tradition got jinxed this year. He tried to do the old Spider-Man spot on the outer barricade after Owens pushed him off the top rope, and I honestly don't know what went wrong. I think he may have gotten a little too much airtime and miscalculated the distance between the ring and the barricade, but it's like before he could grab onto the barricade with his feet dangling, his feet ended up touching the ground anyway. Like, you could tell the refs were all scrambling on the outside. They were panicking, like, oh fuck, what do we do? And I think the reality eventually set in. It's like they just called an audible and said, well, shit's on camera now. Sorry, Kofi, you're out. And Kofi's reaction was great, too. He just turned over his shoulder to look at the ref like, what? And that was it for Kofi in the match. I'm sure he and Vince had a stern talking to in Gorilla. I do not think Kofi's getting that WWE title redemption story anytime soon. Let us just leave it at that. Otis was in at 25. I still prefer the wacky oaf, long-haired babyface Otis over the clean-shaven, short-haired heel Team Gable gimmick, but it is what it is. You know, WWE ruins everything. What else do you expect? Number 26, we had Big E. And jeez, did Big E get the jobber treatment in the ring or what? Getting unceremoniously dumped out by Riddle and Orton without getting a single elimination. Big E was just another dude in this match, despite the fact that he walked into that Day 1 main event 3 weeks ago as the WWE Champion. Thanks for stopping in, Big E. Don't let the door hit you in the rear on the way out. I feel bad for the dude. I didn't follow much of Big E's title reign before that Day 1 show, but this isn't the first time WWE gives one of their former champions the job treatment shortly after dropping the strap. Did the same thing with Kofi. Bad Bunny was in at number 27. I remember watching his Mania match last year with Damien Priest, Miz, and Morrison. Can't recall much of the details in the match, but I remember Bad Bunny wasn't half bad in the ring. They actually gave him a little bit of time here, too, before getting dumped by Lesnar. Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert. I guess number 28 was a moderately big shock for people. Shane McMahon made his return, and that got a relatively decent pop. His punches still look like ass, but Shane returning here actually makes me start to think they have something planned for him at Mania. I can only imagine. And by this point, with 2 entries left, there were really only 2 possibilities left. They were in St. Louis, so obviously Randy Orton was going to be one of them, and sure enough, he was number 29. And the other entry, if you were even half paying attention to the story throughout the night, you pretty much figured it was probably going to be Brock Lesnar, and that it was. Coming out at number 30, just, well, like it was already planned out. They didn't run with the story of him laying a dude out in the back to steal a spot. The announcers didn't acknowledge or sell it as a shock. Nope, just, here's Lesnar, lol. And by this point, if you could not see where everything was going, you're probably giving WWE too much of the benefit of the doubt when it comes to creativity. And I'll say this, let me just skip to the end. Who gives a fuck about it? Brock Lesnar eliminated Drew. He won the match, and he even had to partake in that sign point charade afterwards. It's not to say that the predictability of Lesnar winning was bad, because I don't want to conflate the two terms. Predictable doesn't always mean bad. My problem more so just has to do with how lame and underwhelming it all came across. Like, once Reigns retained the belt in the opening match, I already figured this was the path they were going to go. Like, the overarching story throughout the night, while not executed poorly, like, we all just saw it coming a mile away. And it played out exactly as we all knew it would. And the last thing I told myself before the show was over was, well, that was predictable as fuck. And like maybe I would have been fine with it if I already wasn't irritable and exhausted by the time we got to this point. It's like, after that opening match, Rollins and Reigns, that was where the show peaked. And starting with that Women's Rumble match and even carrying over through the main event, this show was just one slow, churning downward spiral. At least if there were one or two good to great matches following that opener, it would have been all right to go with the lame duck blase finish of Lesnar winning. But after sitting through 4.5 hours to get to that point, bearing in mind I skipped the pre-show because I'm not that fucking crazy. But man, after all that, it just left such a bitter taste in my mouth by the time the show was over. It's Reigns and Lesnar at Mania again. And like with the rumors I'm hearing that apparently the plan is for Ronda to wrestle Charlotte instead of Becky. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be all that surprised. See, the logical story is to do Ronda and Becky, given the backstory with the two. And it's the match people actually want to see. So, of course, they're going to waste Ronda's Mania return match on the overpushed, overhyped female Ric Flair impersonator. So, already going into Mania, the two big title matches and selling points for that show, and I'm just left going, meh, who cares? So, just to wrap a bow on this whole thing, the show was not good. Was I mad when it was over? No. Was there anything that visibly pissed me off? I mean, aside from having to sit through another terrible Women's Rumble match, not really. The Lesnar Reigns stuff, although everyone saw it coming, it was executed well. But when it was over, the only thing I really wanted to see coming out of it was another Rollins-Reigns match. I guess there's always the possibility with them doing another Mania triple threat, throw Rollins in there with Lesnar and Reigns just to spice it up and make it interesting. And, I hate multi-man matches to begin with, but this would at least make rational sense to do it given how they booked the finish of that opener. But, they'll probably just blow it off in that Saudi Arabia Elimination Chamber show. The next WWE show that I plan to recap, that would be the Mania show. I mean, I don't really have much of an interest in talking about the Elimination Chamber show. Although I guess if I'm desperate for content to talk about, I can throw it in there as a final talking point in a few weeks. But that was the 2022 Royal Rumble. I hope I provided a little bit more context than what the mass audience has given by this point. Good opener, but oh my God, did the show fall off a cliff right after. But we'll be back on Friday for another round of wrestling reporting. Thanks for stopping in. Hope you all enjoyed. And I will be back on Friday for the Dynamite Report in the next round of our Retro Review series. Take care, all. Peace out.